Good evening, and welcome to the Albright Scholar for January 2019. My name is John Pankratz. I teach history at Albright, and each month it's my privilege to welcome BCTV viewers and residents of Greater Reading to take a glimpse inside our learning community up here on North 13th Street, to look at the work being done by teachers and students, and to think a bit about its impact on all of us. Happy New Year to you all. Albright is in its interim term, the January term that comes between the fall semester and the spring semester. And some teachers and some students are participating in interim courses. I'm teaching one myself. We have several study abroad courses in Cuenca, Ecuador, and in Hawaii and other locations. But for many of our teachers and students, we're getting ready for a very busy spring semester. Today it's my privilege to welcome Maite Barragan to the show. Maite is a new professor beginning just the end of August in a field that has been taught at Albright before, but we've never had a full-time specialist in art history. So we're thrilled to have you at Albright, and thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me, John.
That's great. We should find out a little bit about your background, your education, and where you've been and come from.
Well, I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. And then I pursued my undergraduate degree in Madrid, in Spain.
Oh, wow.
It's not quite a bachelor's degree. It was back in the day when they were still doing their own system of learning.
Right.
So it's a licenciatura, which is a 5-year degree.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went to get my PhD in the United States, I attended Temple. They actually turned it into a master's combined master's and bachelor's degree. Mm-hmm. So I pursued my doctorate in Temple University, so here in Philadelphia. So I am more familiar with Pennsylvania, but now I'm becoming more familiar with Reading specifically.
Great. And you're an art historian. Were you an artist before, or?
I was not an artist. I enjoyed doodling and playing with crafts and all that stuff, but I have not considered myself an artist, mm-hmm. At least ever since I turned maybe 14.
Okay.
So, yes.
So how does one discover that calling to art history?
Well, initially it's quite simply, I really did enjoy looking at art, and I also really enjoyed history. And so quite simply, the combination of the two is what it would initially have attracted me to pursue the degree. But obviously, as you actually get more involved in a discipline, you're thankfully, you're thinking about them. It's also, your thinking, your consideration about them also deepens. And yes. I realized that one of the interesting things about art is a lot of people, I think, would agree that art is intended in many cases to give us pleasure. But beyond that, art can be incredibly challenging. Mm-hmm. Art is a way of seeing the world differently. And in many cases, personally, one of the things that most interests me, one of the aspects of my discipline that most interests me is what we see actually informs and shapes us. So we come to see ourselves and understand ourselves through that which we perceive. So if representations of ourselves, finding new parts of our identity that mm-hmm. we didn't know existed until mm-hmm. we actually see them represented in an artwork, be that a painting, a film, theater, or a play or something of that sort. So, and I find that really fascinating because when art is being discussed and we think about the basic, like, yes, it gives us pleasure, but it can also do so much more, which can be troubling at times as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested in finding those, in finding that social history and that personal history in artworks.
Right. Well, the way you describe that, art history seems to me an essential discipline to be taught at a liberal arts college.
I agree.
Because that personal transformation is so big a part of what we aim for. As I said, art history courses have been taught here all along. Professor Harry Casaros taught art history courses from time to time. My dear colleague in history, Barbara Fahey, became really a specialist in Catholic Reformation painting and Peter Paul Rubens and that sort of thing. And of course, Archie Perrin has taught a number of different art history courses from his base in German studies and German language. But you're the first person with her PhD in art history and then dedicated to these transformative courses. You've finished one semester. You've taught 3 classes so
Yes.
far. How has it been? What have your students been like, and what have you done to reach them?
I have been really energized by the Albright students. So, as I guess it happens with any new job, you go in and you're thinking, I mean, I've done this before, so there should be certain things that should be easy. And then, of course, you realize all the different environment, it's a different school, rules, etc. So all these things start taking up your time. So, but going into the classroom, I was constantly energized by having really bright students, the fact that they had a lot to say, the fact that they challenged my ideas. And so I found have been really enjoying teaching Albright students. And I'm looking forward to getting more of them next semester and getting to know more of them. It's been an interesting transition in the sense that I did teach before, but it's also been interesting to see how different each school, the type of personalities that it attracts. And having gone from, I taught at Temple for a while I was getting my degree, so it's a huge public school, and then I taught another small liberal arts in the Midwest. Now I'm back in a small liberal arts, but here in Pennsylvania. And so it's kind of interesting in that sense where you uncover a lot about the personality of the area
of a region,
of a region through the students, as well as, of course, the personality of an institution. But you only get to see that after an extended period of time with interacting with students. So I'm looking forward to getting to know them more.
Now, you're teaching some students who are art majors or maybe art and education majors, and so they need to take some art history.
Yes.
But you're also teaching courses for Gen Ed students, right?
Yes. So I'm teaching, so I taught the last semester, I taught 20th Century Art of Latin America. That was a general education course. So I had students that had kind of introduced themselves because they needed to check off a general education, and they just saw this and it worked.
Right, and they didn't have to draw, and they didn't have to sing, and they didn't have to dance on stage.
So it worked. It worked. But of course, many of them were slightly, oh wait, how does this work? Because art history is it's an interesting discipline because it is inherently interdisciplinary. Unless you're just looking at the connoisseurial aspects of how to identify an artist, which isn't really what I find most interesting, because it feels to me more like an auction house kind of role, right?
Yeah.
You're just trying to identify.
An antiquarian sort of approach.
Yeah. But just having students in many ways challenge themselves, because I think that the only reason we keep looking at great paintings and sculptures or objects that populate our world is because we keep finding things to say about them. So just putting up a slideshow and it's just a slide, and we've kind of been I've introduced the students to a certain era, a certain time period, the historical, social situations, and then asking them to what do you see? And what do you see in 2 ways? What do you see as just right there in front of you without even thinking about what I just explained? And then let's see how this might work within that context. Because this artwork continues to exist, or in most cases. So it still says something, or the document of that artwork that existed still has something to say. So we can bring to it some of our personal experience and our personal baggage.
So these multiple contexts.
Exactly.
The one that produced the work in the first place, but then the way it's been received
and how it
by
continues,
everybody else and by ourselves.
Yeah. So, and that I feel like it still works, of course, within the fine arts. You are working through your creativity, but you have to really contextualize it and have it make meaning, and make that meaning, like, you have to validate your arguments in many ways through the artwork or through these, other associations that
Right.
come through along with it.
Yeah. Well, I know your own preparation is really very broad. You are sort of a historian of 20th century Europe, and you've done work on a Spanish sculptor. I know I heard your job talk last spring. But then you've also done work on Latin American artists and American art, so a really wide range. Are you happy to cover all that territory?
I'll be honest, I am very curious. I love consuming information. Maybe that's over, like, extending myself in many ways, but I'm very curious. I love learning. And so my area of study is definitely like 20th century Spain, especially before the Spanish Civil War. That would be my emphasis, but I've grown increasingly interested with the connections, of course, with the transatlantic Spanish America, specifically Caribbean. And once you bring in the Caribbean, you have to deal with North America. So I feel like this triangle, if you will, all of them offer really different opportunities of things to explore. But some of the themes that I'm interested in continue to reappear. They continue to appear everywhere historically, but continue to reappear in what I tend to focus on. So issues of identity, issues of nationalism, nation formation, if you will, social and political concerns, and how those can be introduced or can be read into artworks that are produced in certain areas, certain periods, which I guess we can say that about any artwork produced. It has these social and political implications.
Right, and those same questions can be asked about any place, any region, any work.
Yeah.
Neat.
So I'm like, one of my upcoming interests is actually dealing with still lives from the late 19th century, Puerto Rican still lives. And I mean, still lives, I think, are for many people kind of the uninspiring art because you only can see so many of them. But of course, like, my interest being that this painter from he lived into the 20th century, Francisco Oller. He's known as a realist, and he paints these still lives of fruits from Puerto Rico. And thinking about these still lives, which again, very, how shall we say, comfortable and not that, I guess, for many.
Homey and domestic
yes,
sort of thing.
kind of subject matter, but thinking about the fact that, of course, he's focusing on what he has available, and thinking about the social implications of that, because, of course, there's certain foods bring with them social baggage.
Yep.
Who can eat what and who gets to eat what? And in Puerto Rico specifically, because it was a country that had a large slave population, had an economy, of course, based on sugar, rum, and all these other exports, coffee, etc. There's these even clearer connotations of who gets to eat what kinds of foods. So thinking about, if you will, what social story can be told through these fruits that he paints. And moreover, and what can that mean nowadays when we're thinking about Puerto Rico, a country that imports most of its food?
Yeah.
Like, what might those paintings mean now? Because those are, they're still important, and they still, like, Puerto Ricans are still very proud of these homegrown painters that made a name for themselves outside in Spain. So what might that bring to the table?
Right. And then the question, who's consuming works of art as well?
Yeah.
Oh, how fascinating. Well, speaking of location, Reading is in sort of an enviable location for an art historian, because you're 20 feet away from the Friedman Gallery of Contemporary American Art at Albright. The Reading Public Museum is a short ride away, but then many of the world's great museums, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the National Gallery, and the other museums in D.C., and then, of course, New York City.
Yes, it's very exciting. I'm planning, last semester I took my students to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. I hadn't gone there for a while, so I had this tour set up, and I was...
Had the students been there before?
A lot of them had.
Running up the steps, maybe?
One of the things I mentioned, unfortunately, when you go as a group, you have to go through the back.
The back?
you miss the Rocky steps. But I was myself surprised because they changed some stuff, and I was like, I this is most of the stuff I recognize where everything is. They don't change them that often. I was glad to meet new artists and meet new paintings and sculptures from their collection. And next semester we're going. Well, the upcoming semester we're going to the Metropolitan Museum.
Great.
So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah.
Encyclopedic as it is.
Yeah, what a monument that is.
It is to all civilizations.
Great. Tell us what courses will you be teaching in the spring semester?
Yes. So I am going to be teaching Portraying the Nation, which is based on its episodes of American art, specifically thinking about portraying the nation, how representations of Americans and of America, of the United States, how those have shaped Americans' identity and their understanding of their citizenship. I'm working on that syllabus still. I'm very excited about that particular class. I've been very, very immersed in American history lately.
Great.
In constitutional history.
I certainly endorse that, yes.
I'm teaching a general survey, a global survey, which is just an introduction to art history through all the ages.
Wow.
And then a focus survey, which starts at the very end of the medieval period into the around Impressionist 19th century era.
Okay.
So that one's that one gives me a little more time to introduce readings and focus on particular objects. The global survey it's a really fast-paced course of all the things.
In our interconnected age, there's no doubt that we have access to so much imagery.
We do, and I think that's one of the things that I hope to impart to my students, that the idea that we're bombarded with visuals is something very much of our era, that for centuries before us, the one opportunity, maybe unless you were very incredibly wealthy, your opportunity would be in your house of worship. That would be where you would actually engage beautiful, sumptuous imagery. Arts and
always
luxury.
with that theological overlay, and always a message there that you were supposed to imbibe.
As part of and thinking about how these images, of course, are meant to impress upon you the importance of these spaces, but also inspire devotion.
Right.
And I think now we think about it, and museums are kind of their own sacred space. It's just like we were talking about the Philadelphia Museum of Art. You have to climb up these stairs.
Right. It's a temple.
It is a temple for culture. So how art we still have this way of interacting with it. So I do want students to think about.
And sometimes that's a barrier to overcome.
It is
for students.
absolutely.
Oh, I don't know if I have the right reference or reverence, or I don't know if I'm qualified to come up and look at this stuff.
And that's and for me, that's something really important, precisely because I think two things happen. One, we're so used to looking at imagery that we think that we should just kind of flip through our way through museums, when in fact these paintings actually, the payoff is looking at them for a really long time. And we don't seem to have that patience built into our systems anymore, especially when you have an enormous museum and you want to see as much as you possibly can.
Right.
But you're not really seeing, you're just kind of just
Checking it off. Yeah.
Yes, you're glossing over it rather than kind of really indulging in one or two or three works of many. I myself, sometimes you just want to see more things. It's a natural instinct.
Yeah.
So that, as well as, of course, the idea that how our environments really shape us and how we can interact differently in artwork because it's in a gallery and it's in a quiet space versus when it's out in public, and the demands that art has on us. So I want students to kind of consider these issues as we go through the semester. The fact that we're seeing them as well in a classroom in not the perfect way we should be seeing them, because we're seeing a projection of them.
Right.
They're we're seeing things that are very small, blown up to an enormous size, but we're we're seeing a reflection. We're seeing simply like the shadow of
Sort
the
of a
actual
flat thing,
object.
yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
and so having students go to the Met or having them go to the Friedman Gallery, which are these great resources, has them exercise new ways of seeing and push them to consider how these different spaces influence their perception of these works of art. And hopefully, slowly throughout the semester, having them really think that anything that surrounds them, their visual world, is something that they can really consider and interpret and kind of think upon.
Think about and allow to change them.
Yeah.
I think that happens. I follow enough of our graduates into their adult lives, and I see them going off on trips to Europe or trips to Asia or exploring new parts of the world, and there's a kind of readiness and an openness that they bring with them, and that's really gratifying to see.
It is.
You've got some wonderful colleagues over there in the Center for the Arts, a new curator of the Friedman Gallery,
Yes.
Elena Coates,
Yes.
and then some fabulous practicing artists as well.
Yes, it's very, I feel incredibly fortunate to be working with just first people with such talent and enthusiasm and just dedication for their students. I'm the curator, Elena, as well as David Tanner. They just have so many projects lined up, and honestly, it's just more of a chance of making sure that there's an opportunity to introduce these projects into the classroom and have them, have the activities somehow overlap, because there's so many things going on. It's just a great resource.
Yeah.
So I'm really enjoying that. I'm making use of the Albright collection as well, having my students look at it.
Right, and I know some students have been engaged as curators, student curators
Yes.
of shows in the project space, and that's been fabulous to see.
Yes, it is. I'm always interested to see what they come up with.
And since there hasn't been sort of an art history sequence necessarily before, you're doing some curricular design as well.
I am just trying to focus a little bit more on these kind of thematic classes. Offer the surveys, just 2 surveys, so part 1 and part 2. Keep it global, because I do want students to consider like the connections
Right.
And different definitions of art throughout different cultures, as well as how art has been defined and how it's changed. That definition, if you will, is not stable. And I want them to get that background, but then I want to start moving ahead and creating a lot of 200 and 300 level courses that has them really practicing making art history. Because if there's something very gratifying, is having students actually take on objects and paintings, anything that they're interested in, and having them use the tools of art history in order to, if you will, deconstruct them or reimagine them in many cases. And I think that's really gratifying. So I'm looking forward to getting an opportunity to do more of that as I create more 200 and 300 level classes.
That's right. One of the great benefits of being at a small place is that you meet students in their freshman year, but you reconnect with them in their junior or senior year.
Yes.
And you observe that learning process, and there's nothing more
Yes.
wonderful.
And knowing your students a little bit already, it's wonderful to see them grow as scholars, as writers, as communicators, and so you also get to follow their interests, and you get to connect with them in so many different levels.
Yeah. And those field trips to big cities, those are often
Yes.
really fun activities.
And I get so stressed out. I admit that I get very stressed out because there's so many
You don't want to
things.
lose anybody in
I don't
New
want to
York,
lose
no.
anybody at all. Oh God, that would be a nightmare. But I do get stressed out. But then I feel so happy when I hear students telling me later on that I've never gone to that museum, and I'm so glad we actually did that, because I had never seen a museum like that. Some students haven't had the opportunity to go to an art museum, and it is a very different space, and sometimes it's good. I feel very happy to be able to kind of like guide them through, and also tell them like this is own this, like go to whatever area you want to see, just explore. Even Arms and Armors, right? Like that's
Yeah.
every kid's dream. Go for it. Why not?
I know my own experience is every time I go to a museum and interact intensely with the works, as I leave, nothing looks the same to me anymore.
Yes.
So I think having that effect and then having the tools to make sense of it is just a wonderful gift. Great. We are delighted you're off to such a good start here.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward to the spring semester and your interactions with students and our dear colleagues as well.
Yes, I'm looking forward to all of that and spring as well. Just
And
the weather.
springtime, yeah. Well,
Yes.
it has gotten cold here. We'll put that on the record just in case winter never returns to Pennsylvania again. But it's cold this week at least. Yeah. Maite, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you for having this conversation and for inviting me.
Great, great. And thank you for joining us as well. We'll see you again in the month of February on another edition of The Albright Scholar. Good night.